My brother's wedding toast started with, "I have two sisters, one who runs her own law firm, and one who still asks mom what to eat for breakfast." The whole room laughed. I'm talking 200 people, open bar, twinkle lights, the whole thing. My sister-in-law laughed, my aunts laughed, even the bartender smirked a little. My brother Marcus, 34 years old, man of the hour, stood there at the microphone, holding his champagne glass, like he'd just said the funniest thing anyone had ever heard at a wedding reception. My older sister Dana added from her seat without even standing up, "Remember when she said she was going to run a tech company someday?" More laughter. She did a little chef's kiss. My mother, from table 3, loud enough for table 7 to hear. She has always lived in her own little world. I was 31 years old, sitting at my assigned seat at a round table near the back, wearing a bridesmaid dress I paid $340 for, holding a fork I had not used, next to a piece of salmon I had not touched. I set down my glass. I folded my napkin. I watched my brother finish his toast and clink glasses with his new wife, who looked genuinely delighted by everything he'd said. Nobody watched me stand up. Nobody watched me walk to the coat check. Nobody watched me leave. I drove home in my bridesmaid dress, sat in my car in my building's parking garage for about 11 minutes, and then went upstairs and fed my cat. That was a Saturday night in March. The following Monday morning, I went to work like normal. I opened my laptop, I made my coffee, I answered 3 emails, and then I made one decision that I had been quietly avoiding for 2.5 years. I decided to stop covering for all of them. Let me explain what I actually do, because this is the part nobody in my family understood. And honestly, that was on them, not me. I had tried to explain it at least 4 or 5 times over the years. The explanations never landed. At some point I stopped trying. My name is Claire. I'm a systems architect. What that means in plain terms is that I design and maintain the backend infrastructure that keeps businesses running. The software pipelines, the automated processes, the integrations between platforms, the invisible machinery. When it works, nobody knows it exists. When it breaks, everything stops. About 3 years before that wedding, my father had come to me with a problem. He and my mother had built a small but real estate portfolio over about 15 years. 4 properties. 2 long-term rentals, 1 short-term, 1 commercial unit they leased to a dental office. The management of these properties had grown complicated. Different platforms, different payment processors, different insurance renewals, different tenant portals. My father, who is brilliant with people and with deals, but who has never once filed anything on time in his life, was drowning. He asked me to help him build a system to manage it all. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He's my father. Over about 6 months, I built them a full property management system, automated rent collection, automated late payment notices, automated renewal reminders, a maintenance request pipeline connected to a vendor list I curated and negotiated rates with, insurance renewal tracking, tax document organization and preparation feeds into their accountant's system, utility account management for the properties they covered utilities on. Everything integrated, everything automated, everything running through infrastructure I designed and maintained on a private server I managed. I did not charge them. I told myself it was a family contribution. I told myself it was what you do. My father called it the computer stuff. My mother called it what Claire does on her computer. My sister Dana, who has a law degree and a sharp tongue and a remarkably consistent inability to understand anything she cannot bill by the hour, once described my work at a family dinner as basically IT support. My brother Marcus, the one with the wedding and the toast and the 200 laughing guests, once asked me if I could fix his Wi-Fi while I was at it. The system ran for 2.5 years without a single significant failure. Rent collected, vendors paid, renewals filed, insurance maintained. The dental office lease renewed automatically 6 months before it would have lapsed. My parents received income from 4 properties with almost no administrative effort. My mother once told a friend, in front of me, that managing their rentals was basically passive at this point. She did not explain why. I was the why. So when I drove home from that wedding in my $340 dress and sat in my parking garage for 11 minutes and then went upstairs and fed my cat, I thought about all of that. And I thought about the fact that at no point in 2.5 years had anyone asked me, directly and sincerely, what I actually did, or how it worked, or whether I needed anything in return. I thought about the fact that my father's birthday toast had been a joke at my expense that he had apparently been workshopping, because the delivery was too clean to be spontaneous. I thought about Dana's chef's kiss. I thought about my mother's voice carrying to table 7. And I thought, I have been running a system for people who think I'm the punchline, and I am the only one who knows how it works. The following Monday, I logged into the admin panel for the property management system. I did not delete anything. I did not break anything. I want to be very clear about this because it matters. I did not sabotage a single process. I simply began the work of transitioning out. I documented everything in a handoff file, thorough, clear, professional. Every vendor contact, every login, every automated process explained step by step, every renewal date flagged in a separate calendar document, 53 pages. I put it in a shared folder and sent my father an email that said, in its entirety, I'm going to be stepping back from managing the property system. I've put together a full handoff document in the folder linked below. Please review it soon, as several things will need active management within the next few weeks. Let me know if you have questions before I fully hand off. Then I transferred the domain and server access to an account in my father's name, revoked my own admin access, and closed my laptop. I did not hear back from my father that day. I did not hear back the next day either. On Wednesday, I got a text that said, "Saw your email. We'll look at it this weekend. Everything still running fine?" I said, "Yes, for now. Please do review the document soon." That was it. I want to tell you what was in those few weeks I had mentioned, because this is where everything becomes very specific. The short-term rental had a maintenance request that had been sitting in the pipeline for 11 days. A guest had reported a water heater issue. Under my system, that would have auto-escalated to the plumber on my vendor list on day 7. I had just revoked the automation. Someone needed to call the plumber manually. The commercial lease with the dental office had an annual compliance review document that the dentist's office sent every March as part of their lease terms. It required a countersigned response within 30 days. The deadline was in 19 days. Under my system, it would have flagged my father 14 days in advance, auto-attached the relevant documents, and sent a reminder every 3 days until signed. That flag no longer existed. The long-term rental on Birchwood had a tenant whose lease was up for renewal in 6 weeks. The renewal offer letter was supposed to go out no later than 45 days before expiration per the lease terms. Under my system, it would have auto-generated and sent. Without it, someone needed to draft it, print it, and send it certified mail within the next 9 days. The insurance on the commercial unit renewed on the 15th of next month. Auto payment had been connected to a payment method I had set up through my own business account as an intermediary, because when I first built the system, my father had not yet set up the business account I'd recommended. I had been meaning to migrate that for months. Now someone needed to do it before the 15th, or the payment would fail. My handoff document explained all of this. All 53 pages, with dates, with contact names, with step-by-step instructions. Nobody read it. I know this because of what happened next. The first thing that failed was the water heater. I learned about it not from my father, but from my college friend who mentioned she'd seen a 1-star review pop up for the short-term rental saying the hot water had been out for 3 days. A guest had been showering cold and had eventually just checked out early and left a review that said, simply, not what was advertised. Avoid. She sent me the screenshot. My phone was quiet from my family for another 4 days after that. Then, on a Thursday morning, I was in a work meeting when my phone started going. I silenced it. When I got out an hour later, here is what I had. 7:48 a.m. My mother, Claire. The dental office people are calling Dad, and he can't find the lease paperwork. Where is it? 8:02 a.m. My father, I need you to log in and pull the dental office file. There's something about a compliance document. 8:17 a.m. My father again. Claire? 8:31 a.m. My mother. This is really important. Can you call us? 8:55 a.m. Marcus. Hey, Dad says you have some kind of system for their properties. Can you help them out? They're kind of stressed. I looked at all of this for a moment, and then I responded to my father only. I said, everything you need is in the handoff document I sent 3 weeks ago. The dental office compliance document is in the folder, tab 3. The response deadline is in 4 days. Let me know if you can't find the folder link, and I'll resend it. My father called me 40 seconds later. Claire, I don't have time to read a 50-page document right now. Can you just handle this one thing? I said, calmly. I've stepped back from managing the system. The document has everything you need. I'm happy to answer specific questions, but I'm not able to log in and manage it anymore. He said, why are you doing this right now? The timing is terrible. I said, I sent the transition email 3 weeks ago. I flagged that things would need attention soon. He said, I didn't think you were serious. I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, I'm serious. Everything is in the document. I hung up, which I have never done to my father in my life, and went back to my desk. The next 2 weeks where I'm not going to pretend otherwise genuinely hard to sit through. Not because I felt guilty. I had made a clean transition. I had documented everything. I had given notice. I was not responsible for the consequences of 3 weeks of inaction on a clear and thorough handoff document. What was hard was the calls, and the texts, and the particular flavor of accusation that came through both. Dana called me on a Friday afternoon and said, with her lawyer voice fully activated, I need you to understand that you are creating a genuine legal and financial liability situation for this family right now. I said, what specifically are you referring to? She said, the insurance lapse. Dad's commercial unit is currently uninsured because some payment failed and he didn't know about it. I said, that's documented in the handoff file, section 4. There was a payment method migration that needed to happen before the 15th. I flagged it. She said, nobody knew about that. I said, it was in the document. She said, and this is a direct quote. Claire, nobody is going to read a 53-page document. I said, I know. That's actually been the whole problem. She went quiet for a moment. Then she said, what does that mean? I said, it means I've been managing a system for 3 years that nobody understood or asked about, and when I gave clear professional notice with a full transition document, nobody read it. I'm not the one who created this situation. She said, you're being vindictive because of a toast. I said, I'm being professional. The toast just clarified something I should have addressed a long time ago. She hung up on me, which honestly felt appropriate given the circumstances. The commercial unit situation resolved itself, but not cheaply. My father had to purchase a short-term coverage binder to bridge the gap, which cost him more than a month of my original server maintenance cost. The dental office compliance document was filed late, which triggered a cure notice under the lease terms that required a formal response and put everyone on edge for about 2 weeks before the dentist agreed to waive the technical breach. The Birchwood tenant did not receive her renewal offer in time, decided to look at other apartments because she thought they weren't going to renew her, and ultimately found a place she preferred and gave notice. My parents lost a tenant they'd had for 4 years. Marcus called me on a Sunday. His voice was different from Dana's less lawyer, more genuinely confused. He said, I don't fully understand what happened with Mom and Dad's properties, but it sounds like it was connected to something you were doing for them. I said, yes. He said, for how long? I said, about 3 years. He was quiet. Then, I didn't know that. I said, I know. He said, Dad always just said things were running smoothly. I said, they were. Because I was running them. Another pause. Then, is this because of what I said at the wedding? I took a breath. I didn't want to make this small, and I didn't want to make it bigger than it was either. So I said, it's because I realized I had been making myself small for a long time, and what you said at the wedding made it impossible to ignore anymore. I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left because it was time to stop doing something that no one valued. Marcus said, I valued it. I just didn't know it existed. I said, that's the same thing, Marcus. He didn't have an answer for that. We stayed on the phone for another few minutes without saying much. When we hung up, it wasn't warm, but it wasn't broken either. I think he was genuinely sitting with something. I want to tell you how things stand now, because I know from experience that these stories feel incomplete without it. My parents hired a property management company. It costs them 11% of monthly rental revenue across all 4 units. Before, they paid me nothing. The management company does about 60% of what my system did, charges them more than the server costs I used to eat, and according to my father is fine, I guess. The dental office lease is stable. They found a new tenant for Birchwood, who pays slightly less than the previous one. The short-term rental got 2 more bad reviews during the transition chaos before stabilizing. Dana has not apologized. I did not expect her to. My mother called me about 2 months after everything, and said, not exactly as an apology, but as close as she gets. I didn't realize how much you were doing. I said thank you. I didn't explain further. It was enough. Marcus sent me a bottle of wine and a card that said, I'm sorry the toast was cruel. I thought I was being funny and I wasn't. I want to understand your work better if you'll let me. I have not called him back yet. I will. I'm just not ready to make it easy quite yet. And I think that's fair. My father has asked me twice if I would consider rebuilding the system for them under a formal consulting contract. I have not said yes, and I have not said no. I sent him a rate sheet. He said that seems like a lot. I said it's standard. He hasn't responded to that. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm also not discounting it. We'll see who he is when he has to actually decide. As for me, I am fine. More than fine, actually. I have been sleeping better. I have been focusing on my actual clients, the ones who pay me, and who say thank you, and who understand that what I do is not IT support, and not the computer stuff, but real, skilled, specific work that keeps their operations alive. I told a close friend the whole story over dinner last month. She listened all the way through, then put down her fork and said, so you were the entire engine, and they thought you were decorative. I said, yeah, pretty much. She said, how does it feel now? I thought about it for a second. Then I said, like I finally took up the space I was always taking up. I just stopped pretending I wasn't. There's something I've been thinking about since all of this happened. Something I want to say carefully because I don't want it to sound like a moral, and I don't want it to sound like winning, because I'm not sure it's either of those things. When you make yourself invisible to keep the peace, when you do the work quietly, when you don't correct people who misunderstand you, when you let the punchline land without defending yourself, you are not being humble. You are teaching people a false version of who you are. And eventually, you either have to correct the lesson or keep living inside someone else's story about you. I chose to correct it. It cost something. It cost a relationship with my sister that I'm still not sure how to repair. It cost months of family tension. It cost my father a property management bill he didn't expect. It cost me a clean, easy version of belonging that I had been buying with my invisibility. But I know what I do now. I know what it's worth. And the people in my life who matter, the ones I'm building toward, they know it too. That is not a small thing. That is actually everything. Don't build the foundation in silence and then act surprised when they party on the balcony without you. Build it. Name it. Charge for it. And if someone uses your name as a punchline at a party you paid to attend, remember, they only get to do that once.